As far as I'm concerned, as long as that same respect and recognition is not shown toward every one of our people in this country, it doesn't exist for me. And during the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
As I have consistently said for quite some time, I'm doing my learning in public. And a part of that learning in public is literally just trying to find people who I believe can answer the questions that are floating on social media in the minds of so many people. And I try to act as a proxy for many of these questions. So joining me today is my good friend, Dr. Melyssa. How are you? And welcome to the Malcolm Effect.
Thank you for having me, Mamoudou. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. So, class is in session. We're going to pretend or act like, and not even act like actually, because this is true. I am your student. I want you to give me the introduction to gender studies, the rundown, everything we need to know. What are some misconceptions and all of the above? So I am your first year student, or I've just signed up to be your student in your class. What will be the first things or some concepts you're introducing me to?
Welcome to the introduction to gender studies and everything gender. Basically, so I get to teach these courses, actually, these introductory courses as part of my job as I teach women and gender studies, but also research questions of masculinity and other gender-related questions, particularly in Africa and North Africa in post-colonial context. But usually what I try to do in these introductory courses is to begin with clarifying some concepts such as gender, sex, gender presentation, sexual orientation, which people often get confused about, or they may assume that they're all the same because we automatically conflate sex and gender, or biological sex, whatever that means. So I can do a little rundown of
Ready
those.
getting into it. Oh yes, please give me the rundown, and I'm sure I'll have many questions. I'll have many questions that pop up and arise. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we'll start with that, and then we'll talk about, because also gender cannot be conceived as outside of just on its own orbit. It's connected with everything that we do in society. It's connected with power. It's connected with systems of privilege. It's connected with oppression. It's connected to all of these different things. But just to give a little overview of those concepts. So the idea is to think of gender as not being sex. First of all, these are two different things. So sex would be what a baby is assigned when they're born, and most likely just based on genitalia. And we have a sort of like very clear-cut binary ways of looking at that. And then there's genitalia, and then there's chromosomes and everything that's sort of happening inside, which can come into so many into so many combinations. And we tend to think that it's just about an XX and or an XY chromosomes, where people can actually have various combinations. And then when it comes to genitalia, same thing. We do practice, for example, operations on babies when we think that their genitalia is not in certain norms, which are extremely arbitrary, most likely made by doctors, Western white male doctors. So there is all of these things that when we are first born, we are already put into that box that is either or, male or female. But then there's a lot of people that fall in between, which we call intersex, and which can be people will have partially or fully formed genitalia from like sort of both, or you can also have a chromosome combination that's different than a clear XX or XY chromosome combination. So that's sort of the assigned sex. And then gender on its end, which is something different, which is you should think about it as a social construct. Because it's really, it's an arbitrary idea of what we assume to be masculine or feminine. Most likely, we always think in terms of binaries, or at least most likely in the dominant culture, in this patriarchal culture that seems to be happening in a lot of societies, unfortunately. And what we don't realize is that this gender sort of presentation. So the identity of gender is we have clear categories and and ways in which people are assumed to be certain things just because of their sex, and therefore we assume all kinds of other things. And our whole society language is gendered, from the clothing to the societal
Yeah.
roles that we expect from different genders, from career paths, right? When we think of male dominated, what is that called? Fields.
Workspaces and
Exactly. And
fields.
when
Yeah.
thinking that nurses are better when they're women because somehow women have a natural ability for caring and this type of stuff, or sports, when we think of football as being extremely masculine, where their ballet is seen as something that is not deemed to be masculine enough, right? So there's all
Yeah.
of these ways in which our society assigns all of these sort of ideas that are quite
Yeah.
rigid, if we want to be honest. And if anything, they have become even more rigid with time. Just talking about, let's say, the past 50 years in Western societies of hyper masculinity and hyper femininity type of
Yes.
expressions all over in our society. And the thing is that is important to understand is that these things are actually extremely, they fluctuate. They're not fixed and
Yep.
rigid, because when we look historically, or even we don't even need to go that far, but we know that in life has happened in many ways in other places
Yep.
of the world, and the ways in which men or women will dress, wear
Yep.
makeup. When you think of Native American cultures, for example, men wear makeup. And actually it happened also in a lot of African cultures and groups that we see both in
Absolutely.
the past and still in contemporary times. Same with wearing a dress, for example. The clothing is the most, I think, the thing that we tend to assess so much meaning. But when
Hmm.
we see that in a lot of places of the world, men wear dresses.
I've,
I'm from Algeria. That's what men used to do before colonial times, and we still do wear gandora. But then in the Western sense, that's not masculine, right?
yeah.
So there is that. So gender basically as a social construct, and then there is gender expression, which I sort of talked about, but then also what we deem, it's hair, it's everything, it's even the gesturing, right? The ways
Yep.
in which we sit, that we don't think
Yep.
about, that we think it's a natural way that women will close their legs, for example. But no, we've been literally taught since we were little girls, most likely, that a woman or a girl is not supposed to be, or is supposed to sit a certain way, and men, same thing. And if you fall out of those categories, society is very quick to tell you that you're out of your script, basically, or you're not following the script, and that turns into, a lot of times, into violence, harassment in the worst case scenario. But it's also just microaggressions on a regular basis. And we see that a lot with children and in educational spaces, where
Hmm.
a lot of children who do not feel that they conform to the whatever norm of their gender will be
Yeah.
immediately received with harassment in verbal ways, physical ways. So, yeah, there is that. So, gender as a construct, gender presentation, and then finally, sexual orientation and desire,
Yep.
which has nothing to do with any of that. The
Oh,
who
okay.
who we desire, the ways in which we have been, because we think a lot on in terms of heteronormative ways, and we
Hmm.
tend to think that because life is created a certain way, quote unquote, naturally, that means that human beings are then have to do that all the time, quote unquote, when really we know that when people enter in sexual and intimate relationships, they're not
Yeah.
necessarily planning to procreate and have a baby every time, because that would be
Exactly.
really, yeah, the yeah, we would be overpopulated. And if anything, like at this point, it takes 9 months to happen. I mean, there's all of these things, right? So
Okay.
desire has nothing to do, we are sexual beings, and we
Yeah.
do have intimate relationships, sexual physical relationships with people that have nothing to do with necessarily reproduction. So who we choose to desire, what person, the body, quote unquote, is also something that is quite arbitrary. Yet our most of our ideologies will try to make us believe that this is just the natural way, and we know that people have desired people of their gender for the longest time. It's not a new phenomenon. I see a lot of conversations rooted in homophobia and
Hmm.
transphobia, which I also will talk about too, in terms of cisgendered, transgendered
Yeah.
people. We're always received with the same criticism, that is not the natural thing to do. And it's like, it's interesting because we know that we have doing these quote unquote unnatural things for a long time. And if a lot of
Exactly.
people are doing it, that means there's something that we should probably not
No,
stop trying to put
absolutely.
people in boxes.
Absolutely. I've often said that if heteronormativity was so quote unquote natural, then society and ideologies the societies have built wouldn't spend so much time to reinforce it, because it would be the thing
Absolutely.
that everyone just did anyway.
Absolutely,
It would
because
be
it
the
would
thing that
be
everyone
so
did.
natural to us that we wouldn't have
Exactly.
to constantly have it everywhere in our discourse, because it's from our films and visual discourse,
Exactly.
advertising, the books, religion, all the institutions basically preach gender, or at least binary heteronormative
Yeah.
ideology onto us without realizing it. And to a point, and since we conflate biological sex and gender, it makes it so easy to just be like, yeah, that's the way. That's the only way you can be. You
Yeah.
need to fall into that one category of whatever being a woman or a man in your society means, because as we know, it
Yeah.
changes depending on time and space.
Exactly.
But yet we want to pretend that this is a natural thing, that women have always that, for example, men in the Western world have always worn their hair short, and that's really the
It's
sign of
nonsensical.
of masculinity, quote unquote. Yet it's not a fact at all. Men have
Yeah,
continue
it's
in a
not. It's
lot
quite
of
nonsensical.
cultures.
I think it's quite nonsensical. I did want to ask a question
Hmm.
in terms of, okay, so this is not my view, but this is what I can imagine people will think about. So
Hmm.
when we talk about like biology and bodies, and don't get me wrong, I definitely feel we have a weird obsession with bodies,
Hmm.
and I definitely feel that's like a remnant of a lot of like race-based science anyway,
Hmm.
where they're trying to prove like, because you have to think about it, we categorize people based on like physical difference in
Hmm.
order to justify their oppression, or
Hmm.
in order to justify, okay, these people are a different type of human to us, but we know scientifically there is no subspecies within the human. We're all one, we're all human beings now.
Hmm.
So everything else we're arguing about is literally a matter of degrees. So then what would you then say if people say, okay, but typically, people say this, I don't even know how true this is, but typically men are stronger, or because sorry, not men, but because biological males produce testosterone more, that gives them a more of a propensity to violence or to aggression, for example. And they say that that's the evidence then that this is what manhood is built on and womanhood is built on. They produce estrogen. So then they
Mm,
bring the hormonal argument. How do you
yeah.
respond to that?
I mean, there's a lot of literatures and studies about that showing how much testosterone doesn't do much in that sense. So it's not like the levels are not in a difference that it will actually change your mind or your behavior.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think, again, it's a lot of misconceptions that we, just to reassure the masculinist agenda, we make
Hmm.
sure that we look now at this biological thing as being the ultimate argument, right? When really,
Yeah.
when you put in a scanner the brain of a woman or a brain of a man, most likely you can't really make the difference.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we can see, quote unquote, as being different, but really internally we're way more closer or it's the same, similar than actually different. So no,
Okay.
I don't think there is sort of a genetic predisposition or a chromosomal predisposition for men to be more violent or aggressive or whatever all these type of behaviors we attach to masculinity,
Okay.
because we see it. It's men do the violence because we teach them to do so, because not all men
Hmm.
are violent, thankfully, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that shows that there's also, again, a lot of constructed that we get conflated with this
Exactly.
biological arguments. But no, the testosterone levels doesn't do much, to be honest. I mean, I'm happy to send you some literature about that, but the studies
Please.
are pretty, yeah, pretty clear about that.
Okay, so then let's talk about gender being a social construct. Many people will say, so then a lot of the discourse is people can now feel themselves into another gender, quote unquote. So let's say I was assigned male at birth. I no longer feel like I fit into the category and description in which my current society defines as male. Therefore, I identify as something else. Is that feeling, people will say, is that feeling enough for such a switch? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think so. Gender is actually something that is self-generated
Okay.
in that sense, because we have this, we assigned those sex at birth, and then people don't necessarily want to by the gender code that they're in, right,
Okay.
in their society, and they feel that something is not right, and they just decide to identify with what they feel most comfortable with.
Okay.
But then it also goes with just, and that most likely, it, then you are a transgender person and trans woman if you are assigned a male at birth, and then feel that you identify with being a woman, and
Yeah.
vice versa. But at the same time, there's so many ways in which in our society, without even sort of changing our gender, where we are
Yeah.
castigated on a daily basis. When a woman or assigned female at birth decides to
Yeah.
only wear masculine quote unquote clothing, all of a
Yeah.
sudden she's not a woman anymore, and we'll find all types of way to describe her, to say that she fell out of her femininity and vice
Yes.
versa, without even
Hmm.
going to identifying with a certain type of gender. So this is why also how we don't realize how much our society is extremely, or our societies are extremely, there's like sort of a gender police all the time that is going around without realizing it. It's from the people, that the way they will look at you, or making sure that to tell you how you are falling out of the script. But yeah,
Yeah.
gender is self-generated. I don't have to tell you how you feel inside of your body, and vice versa, and how you
No,
want to
absolutely.
identify.
So then if
So
we're speaking about like gender politics and it
mhm.
being a movement right now, what would you say the aim of the movement is currently? Or what is the aim of the movement? Is it to get people to is it to get society to interrogate how we think about gender and its expressions?
I think so. I don't know if there is a quote unquote unified movement, because then there's a lot of other layers, right?
Of
Because there
course.
is also
Yeah.
discourse, and this also we need to talk about race and power, and the ways in which discourse around certain things are being circulated, because then people will also talk about a certain colonialism of ideas and trying to impose a certain way, and most likely what we call white feminism, that has
Yeah.
been detrimental to a lot of Black and people of color, may it be in the West, but
Yeah.
also in the global South, as we know, with all this type of development, nonprofit type of work that comes in and tells you the only way to be a woman, or the only way to be this, is the Western way, quote unquote.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to make that also sort of precision, because it's important, I think, too, because again, gender is not just a universal thing at all. Even you think we need to think about it constructed and historically, specific, and etc. So when it comes to the ways in which we have been now sort of changing our ways, I think a lot of people are confused, right?
Okay.
With gender, sex, binary, non-binary, transgender, cisgender. And it's really about education. I think we're trying to create societies where we are inclusive of whatever people, how they want to show up and how they want to identify. But
Hmm.
beyond that, I think there is, as you said in your question, I think there is really, I think, an intention to be questioning the categories, and the binary particularly. A
Okay.
lot of people just want to fall out of it. They're like, I do not want to, because a binary doesn't just mean two equal categories, as we know, and that works for race, that works for all the types of
Yeah.
ways in which we try to make a double like a two-way
Yeah.
system, where we know that
It
one
could
is
only
better
be
than
either
the rest.
or. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we know there is an immediate hierarchy that is implied
Of course.
there.
Of
So
course.
there is definitely that, I think, in this quote unquote movement, or we see the circulation of conversations and also work, that has been actually, because a lot of people especially in academic circles, there's nothing new about what's happening, right? I think
Yeah.
if you take a lot, and particularly Black feminists, right, have been talking and questioning these categories for a while, and doing very critical
Yeah.
work in that sense, except that, again, it's always being seen, I mean, first of all, I mean, white supremacy, but also being seen as too radical, as to this, as to that, when really it's
Yeah.
just things that a lot of people have been thinking about, questioning, talking about for decades and decades. It's just now sort of reaching the mainstream. And I
Hmm.
think, yes, it's important to sort of, because it's all about positioning and privilege. How do we evolve in these societies, or in these groups that we live in, and how does my presence, my positioning, does it give me privilege? Do I make sure that others are being seen, treated just with dignity? Because at the end of the day, it's
Hmm.
about that. It's not just abstract topics, right? That we're like, I agree with this,
Yep.
I don't agree with this. It's really about harm. People are being killed because they
Yep.
are not subscribing to the gender script, the dominant
Yep.
gender script. There is an epidemics in the United States of trans women being killed, and mainly Black trans women. So it says something,
Mm,
right? About, it's not just abstract topics about giving an opinion and
exactly.
saying I'm for this or not. It's about people's livelihood and people's survival I don't know if
No,
I answered your
absolutely.
question.
No. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So then you mentioned, okay, back on to desire then. Desire then.
Hmm.
Many people will say, oh, but, they come back to this argument, but it's natural for a man to find things, quote unquote, feminine attractive and vice versa. What do you say that as a comeback to that?
I mean, factually in society, empirically speaking, that is just not simply not true. There are people, who are attracted by, as you said earlier, I really like the fact that you pointed that out. We are obsessed with bodies and what people do
Yeah.
with their bodies. And I think it is definitely a consequence of Western sort of thought, this idea, I mean, colonial ideology of wanting to put
Yeah.
everything into a box in a neat, organized system where people don't do boxes. At the end
Hmm.
of the day, we have so many narratives,
Yeah.
written narratives of same-sex desire from various cultures around the world. So it's not like it happened in that
Hmm.
one place. It's happening, has happened, will continue to happen. And also, I also kind of wonder too, why are people so obsessed by the ways in which people are quote unquote using their body or being in an intimate rapport? Like, how is that your
Yeah.
business, and how does that make it something that you're so interested in? And it's
Yeah.
interesting because we're always obsessed when it's non-normative sexuality, because we don't
Yeah.
think about heterosexual cisgendered couple having sex.
And their bodies, exactly. Exactly. It's
Exactly.
very weird. It's a weird obsession.
So yeah, I think we also
No,
need to
absolutely.
interrogate
I
these.
found no, I found the desire argument quite interesting because I think ultimately people are just gonna like what they're gonna like. And they are now shamed into, oh, you have to like a certain thing or you have to like this. When really and truly, I just think the human experience is way too vast to fit into a binary. The human,
Absolutely.
like what you like in your 20s might be completely different to what you like in your 30s, even. What you like
Absolutely.
in your teens might be markedly different. And that's not even talk about like same sex, even like heterosexual couples, cisgender couples. You find people liking a certain type of aesthetic when they were in their teens, and then
Hmm.
they like a different look later on, and that's completely like understandable. People change, people have experiences inform how they want to go forward, and I find it very strange. But also I think, speaking from like a black man
Hmm.
perspective, not to privilege my lived experience, but I'm just saying that me being socialized as working class black in a particular part of the UK, I definitely understand how heteronormativity and ideals have been pushed onto me. For example, people are afraid to, I mean, I'm African, so I like dancing, yeah. But when I
Hmm.
was younger, I remember like if I went to like a party, it was not cool for boys to dance. You do
Hmm.
not dance because you are a boy. You don't move a certain way, or certain clothing, for example. You were not allowed to be experimented with the types of clothes that you wear or the colors that you wear. And I just thought to myself, I mean, I very early on said to myself, you know what? Before anyone will label me, I will live my life and label myself. I am Mamadou, and whatever that means will change according to how I feel. So
Absolutely.
I find it
Absolutely.
very, yeah, I find it
No,
very
no,
strange
and
that,
absolutely. And
yeah,
we have, exactly as you just expressed, we are constantly reminded by people how we are supposed to live, how we are supposed to move,
yeah,
how we are supposed to talk. And it's just at some point,
yeah,
it's extremely oppressive because these are literally arbitrary characteristic. Who says a man cannot,
yeah,
dance or wear a colorful shirt? This is just
exactly,
very recent development, especially when you come from the Gambia or Senegal like yourself. And it's like
exactly.
the whole clothing is about colors
And dancing and
and
moving and having a good
dancing and the
time.
whole, exactly. And it's just like, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think it even gets deeper when it comes to, let's say, particularly on men, that the lack of intimacy that they're allowed to share with others. And so
Absolutely.
that extends obviously to their daughters, for example, their wives, but also in between men as well. Because
Hmm.
of the label of being called gay, which is still stigmatized,
Hmm.
people are literally robbing themselves from having intimate friendships and intimate connections with people that are not sexual. I've always found it, I mean, I find it very strange that the only intimacy you have is like mediated through a sexual relationship. That can't be
Absolutely.
healthy.
I
That
know,
cannot be
absolutely
healthy
not.
to
And
me.
this is exactly why the dominant masculinity and patriarchy is dangerous, is literally killing women for
Literally.
the most part. Because when you look at domestic violence, most of violence, especially physical violence, is perpetrated by men in most Arab
Yeah.
societies. And the numbers are very clear. Again, this is just factual. We're not even in the domains of opinions or ideas here. patriarchy kills, and dominant hegemonic masculinity based on domination kills every day, and also kills men, because men kill themselves way more than women when it comes to suicide. They're
Wow.
not usually socialized to be allowed to have emotions. Most university today, in most societies in the world, boys are not allowed to cry on average after
Yeah.
the age of 8. 8 is like
Oh
the
wow.
last type of, it's the limit. After that, as you know, they will tell you to man up. You're not a girl to be expressing these emotions. And that's just bundling up so many emotions that the only
Yeah.
time that they are expressed and they will be and accepted by society is when it comes in the form of violence, in the forms of anger. And if anything, we'll say, oh, that's a real
Mm,
man because he has this authority and he just fights for what he wants. When a lot of times it's no, it's somebody needs to deal better with their emotions and they're not
exactly.
processing them well. They don't have anybody to talk to. Men don't talk about their inner life and their
Yeah.
emotions. And if
And the
anything,
funny
it's
thing
being
is, I've been around people, particularly friends and people who I'm close to, and obviously, other than not the mundane, we can have topics, but it's almost as if because of the construction of masculinity and manhood, they're able to like express themselves, and if they get a chance to, though,
Mhm.
people, I mean, we are human beings, we go through traumatic shit. Like,
Absolutely.
we're gonna go through for
Absolutely.
our childhood trauma to unprocessed trauma to, and people have been taught, oh, this is just the way I am. No, you are the way you are because of a series of incidents and events that have happened to you, which have
Absolutely.
formed your personality and the way you are. So when I've been around people, and when people do finally get vulnerable, everything comes up. And I'm like, wow, like, and I often interrogate, what is it holding you back from being able to open up? It's literally, I don't know how, maybe women might be better, but typically it's because, oh, men don't do that.
Hmm.
Men don't open up. Men don't talk about that. And also they're afraid of, it diminishes their status as a man. And I'm thinking, what a crazy world. Honestly, like,
Absolutely. No,
what a
because
crazy world that we live in.
you are emasculated immediately if you don't
Yep.
abide by the tough, strong, no feelings type of man. And no matter how we say that things are changing, the
Hmm.
models in our discourse, our media is still showing these toxic models as the ultimate masculinity to aspire to, which is going to be the
Yep.
athletes, which is going to be the
Yep.
military, which is going to be, it depends on the obviously societies, etc. But I see here, for example, in the United States, the military obsession, quote unquote, is real.
Yep.
And people value that when it's really, wow, what is there to value? It's about being trained to kill other people for most likely not really a good motive or most likely imperialistic
For real.
agenda. So, but in general, you know what I mean? It's just like and actually also what is interesting when you start looking into masculinity is that men actually are more afraid or have more pressure from other men than the actual rest of society to
Oh
maintain
wow.
a certain type of masculinity. And it starts with school, the sports, all of that sort of different institutions in which you have to play the role. And if you
Hmm.
show your feelings all of a sudden, you're going to be made fun of or emasculated.
Yeah.
But
No, for real. And
it's
very toxic. It's very toxic.
very toxic, and it's time we encourage all people, but particularly men, to entertain healthy and deep relationships with the people around them, friends and
Exactly. And that
family.
exactly. And for me, it's not like I'm saying that it needs to be other men, even though I think that's important as well. But I'm just saying that I feel it's very unhealthy if your modes of intimacy are solely mediated through sexual relations. Or only, I think that's a very unhealthy way to be. And I think that does cause weird reactions in people, because immediately someone's being nice to you, you misread signals as if to say, oh, this must be a sexual
Yeah, that's
experience or
the
leading to a
signal.
sexual experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
Like,
I mean, look at the movies we grew up watching.
yeah,
We objectify women constantly, and it's just like we've already placed all of these codes that are
yeah,
so toxic and literally are the perfect terrain and for sexual assault and sexual violence, and not having the
literally,
boundaries and not talking about consent and all of these layers
literally.
that are so absolutely. So it's this sort of dominant masculinity definition or model that we have going on in most of the patriarchal society is really harming a lot of us children,
Absolutely.
women, men, everybody, unfortunately.
No, absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting because I find a lot of the time people just don't expand their kind of view, to what's rather than, because obviously we've been socialized in Western societies, but I'm in Cairo right now, and it's not uncommon to see men linking arms and walking down the street.
Mm-hmm.
It's very normal. That's not interpreted as, it's very just a normal encounter or people hugging. I mean, where
Absolutely.
you come from, Algeria, the
Mhm.
greeting many times is a kiss on the cheek or
Oh,
like cheek to
absolutely. We
cheek.
do like 6 of them if we haven't seen each other in a long time,
And again,
So,
that's just very normal because there's something to be
absolutely.
said about physical touch. And
Absolutely. And,
again,
and it's to
physical
show
touch
you how
doesn't need to be
constructed, right? Again, this is
exactly.
culturally, and then from a Western gaze, you will see this as like, oh my God, what is this? Why are they so close? Are they, and already
Yeah,
making up a whole story of intimacy and sexual story when really are just, no, it's culturally, we've been just okay with touching each other and saying that yeah, and just being comfortable with that. And
yeah,
we've been policing human contact, especially, I mean, with colonialism
literally,
has been extremely detrimental to most of,
literally.
all of the colonized lands and people.
Literally, literally. So let's move on a little bit then on what's the deal with the pronouns? Why do people have pronouns in their bios? Like what's happening? People want to know.
Again, it's to just not to avoid being misgendered because we assume that somebody will present a certain way, abiding or not by, the categories that we we talked, or at least the dominant definitions
Yeah,
of what a man is supposed to be or a woman is supposed to be and present.
yeah.
And some people, first of all, want to make sure that you are identifying them well, which I think is the basic courteous,
Okay.
respectful thing to do. But beyond that, also, there's a lot of people who are falling outside of the binary and they don't want to be referred to as he or she. And I think it's going to
Okay.
be a growing movement of people saying no to the categories as a whole. And that too, I think, deserves to just be respected. So it's not really complicated. If you identify as
Okay.
a cisgendered man or a cisgendered woman, which means that your biological sex matches the gender definition of your society, most likely there is not much you have to do, right? But then
Yeah.
if you have been questioning that and you feel that you either want to transition to a different gender
Yeah.
or to be completely out. For example, myself, I use she they because I
Yeah.
don't mind being referred to as just they, and we do it all the time when we talk
Mm-hmm.
about somebody we don't know. Well, like they did this or somebody was
Yeah.
there and I think they took it. Like it's not
Yeah.
something that is so hard to adapt to. I think again, it's a lot of most of the people who will be critical about this.
Yeah.
First, we need to educate ourselves. That's the minimum we can do. And then
Okay.
second, you are most likely privileged, right? If you have never even asked yourself about these things, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's your duty to sort of understand what's going on in terms of why people are wanting to use those to make sure that you don't misgender them. Does that
Yeah,
does that
and,
make
and I,
sense?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think I've often said the category of non-binary, I think, has the potential to be quite a radical politic, actually.
Yeah,
Only because I think a total rejection of the binaries is probably quite a positive thing in terms of, okay, let us assess where we are and what are the definitions we've inherited, where did they come from, and how do they manifest materially, and how do they contribute to the oppression of certain people in society. And if
absolutely.
they do so, then why not? Why not absolutely like smash them and either start again or have no binary or redefine and that's okay. Like these things are okay. These things are these and you as much as we talk about the grand revolution of overturning capitalism, the other revolution like a gender
Inshallah.
revolution or inshallah in our lifetime, inshallah, you can talk about the sexual liberation and these things. We work through
Absolutely.
things, we redefine, we work through the contradictions. And I think that's an absolute positive thing that we should be doing personally.
Absolutely.
I
I
know people.
agree
I
too.
know my Muslim audience might come and attack me. So for the record, yes, I am a man, a cisgendered man, and identify as a man. Okay, my pronouns are he, him. That's where I'm at now. So if anyone wants to come for me, just don't mix my words up because people love to attack
Absolutely. I mean, I
me.
think again, there is nothing wrong with questioning. And again, if we are really trying to do the work of hopefully getting a true revolution, but mainly dismantling all these systems of oppressions that are working together, may it be capitalism, imperialism, patriarchy, white
Yeah.
supremacy, and so on. We need to start with language. Language is
Hmm.
extremely, it's the base, and language is really important. And we also can see that some languages don't have gender. So again,
Yeah.
that is not a natural phenomenon.
Yep.
Some
Yep.
languages actually do not have a distinction between he and she or any of that sort of binary system. Even when you look at other cultures where gender was never a way to actually stratify or organize society. I think
Exactly.
in the Yoruba culture, actually, until colonization,
Yep.
the ways in which society was divided was only through age. It was either you were a child or
Yep.
an adult, but there was no such thing as woman or man. So it's to tell
Yep.
you
Yep.
how this is arbitrary, and societies have not always organized around gender as being a key element
Exactly.
or a center, or at the center of the project, and let alone patriarchy, because we have also a lot of societies that are matriarchal. We don't talk about them. I mean, we
Yep.
had them, especially in the past, but still now in the south of Algeria and the sort of Sahel region, in Mali, Niger, all of those
Mm-hmm.
regions, most of the societies are still matriarchal up to these days. And the gender roles are
Wow.
very different than what you would expect, especially from the
100%.
Western, quote unquote perspective.
100%. And I think, I mean, you always hear of tales of the like strong matriarch of the family. Very common, like in West African cultures. Like,
Absolutely.
very common.
Yeah. And the ways in
Thank you
which
so
power
much.
circulates,
Yep.
it's never,
Absolutely.
as clear. Thank you,
Absolutely.
actually.
No, this is an amazing conversation. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to have you again. But this has been a very good introduction, I think. I hope it's been beneficial. Please, I will leave Dr. Melyssa's socials on the description of this episode. Reach out to me or her if you want more material or what we've spoken about. And yeah, I just hope this can serve as just the introduction, and perhaps you might have left listening after listening to this episode, you've left thinking about something differently, or maybe tried to, spark an interest in you to get involved in gender discussions and gender debates, which I think can only be a positive thing for many people. Until next time you're listening to The Malcolm Effect with Mamadou, please like, comment, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And until next time, peace out.